Good morning and welcome to Morning Movie News, where I hope now that after it's happened twice to them, Warner Brothers will have finally learned how to set up a sequel for one of their super successful movies. Because tragically, I hope it's not tragic in either case, but it's scary. It Chapter 2 seems to be following the exact same footsteps as the way Wonder Woman 2 is being set up, and that's setting a release date before any of the main talent is attached. There's actually one person attached to It Chapter 2 so far, which I think means Warner Brothers has learned a little bit, so that's good. But for the most part, this sequel is going to be, It Chapter 2 I think will be unnecessarily delayed because they didn't set it up prior to the film's release. And what I'm talking about is having all your talent sewn up, especially for a movie, by the way, that you know needs to have a sequel. You're in front of and behind the camera talent set up and a script ready to go. That's not to say you can't tweak the script a little bit after the movie comes out. If you want to maybe take a second look at it, the stakes are higher, right? But at least, you know, you're ready to go. But they're essentially starting from scratch after It Chapter 1 has been released. And that has led to them having to have a very late release date, in my opinion, which was set yesterday, and that's September 6th, 2019. Which will be 2 years after the first film comes out. Interestingly, that's the same year also that Wonder Woman 2 comes out, so it looks like if they can pull this off, 2019 will be another excellent year for Warner Brothers. But what about 2018? Interestingly enough, we have another movie to discuss about 2018 with the next story, which is pretty exciting. But it's not as big as It Chapter 2 and Wonder Woman 2. So anyway, one of you pointed out that if you add up all the numbers in the It Chapter 2 release date, 9, 6, 2, 1, and 9, it comes to 27. And of course, it's supposed to be 27 years later from the mythology of the book. Now, that's cute and all, but I think it's a poor substitute for having this movie come out a year later. And I can understand that they want to have the same weekend. Hollywood hates to change things if they're working. You know, the old, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Hollywood loves that. So they're like, that's our weekend. And I don't think they feel they can make 2018 because, again, they're going to lose a lot of time negotiating these contracts, which should have been done before. I think even once the first trailer became such a big hit, they should have been like, maybe we should wrap up these deals. Because now all the power is in the talent's side. Just like Patty Jenkins took a super long time getting her deal together because she was holding out. And she got it, but it really delayed the sequel. On a side note, by the way, Patty Jenkins has also been given tremendous creative control for the sequel, allowed to choose a different screenwriter, you know, one of her people. And I'm very sad about Alan Heinberg. And a little bit of an update on that on a side note is that Alan Heinberg, it was, some of you sent me this article from The Hollywood Reporter where their awards expert was talking about who he felt were the front runners for Oscar season so far. And I thought it was so tragic and annoying that this guy feels that Wonder Woman's best shot right now at an Oscar nomination is Alan Heinberg for screenplay. I hope he gets nominated because I think not only did he do fantastic work, but it will underscore how ridiculous and how disrespectful it is that he's not involved in the sequel. Maybe he doesn't want to be. Maybe he's too busy. I don't see why he would be. It's the pinnacle of his career. You know, I think he would make time for it. But if I were Patty Jenkins and in fact he said he did not want to do it, I'd be like, you got to make a public statement that you're just too busy because this is making me and the sequel look really bad. I would love it if he did get nominated. Again, I do think that he deserves it. I watched the movie with you guys again over the weekend. It really is well written. But anyway, I'm very glad that Gary Doberman, by the way, is the one guy coming back for It Chapter 2. They signed that deal right away. And I think it's interesting that Warner Brothers had the ability in this case to make that deal. They didn't have to wait to see if Andy Muschietti and his sister Barbara, who produces with him, were okay with it. They were like, Gary Doberman's writing. We'll see what happens with your deal, Muschietti's, but Doberman's locked down. And he's a big person at Warner Brothers, or becoming a big person, because, of course, he wrote Annabelle Creation for them, which has also performed quite well. It's no It, but it did hit the century mark, and it's part of The Conjuring, which is now a billion-dollar franchise, also haunted by a lawsuit. Now that's spooky. But anyway, back to It Chapter 2. I really feel that it's a mistake to have to wait this long, and I really wish they had been ready to hit the ground running so they could have made the 2018 date. And I think a perfect cautionary tale is 50 Shades. Now, I'm sure some of you are like, what? How could you even dare put 50 Shades in the same sentence as It? Totally different franchises, totally different level of respect and quality, right? But here's the thing, 50 Shades was also a phenomenon. It had a lot of momentum. But E.L. James, also it was a behind-the-scenes problem, said, I hate the ladies I'm working with on this movie. I hate the director. I hate, Sam Taylor Johnson and Kelly Marcel, the screenwriter. They didn't like her either. But I can't believe Universal wasn't like, quit your squabbling. We have a huge hit here. It was a huge step forward for women in the industry. But nobody ever mentioned that like they did with Wonder Woman because of all the infighting and that everybody was embarrassed to be associated with the movie. You should never be embarrassed by tremendous success. So anyway, 50 Shades Darker, the sequel, was delayed an extra year, and that really killed the momentum for the franchise, and you saw that reflected in the box office. So I get very scared that the same thing could potentially happen with It Chapter 2. Even Stranger Things, which is very similar to It. Duffer Brothers pitched for It, didn't get it, went and made Stranger Things. That even though it's been a year and change since the first season, that came out in July 2016, and of course the sequel's coming out, second season comes out October 2017, at least it's 2016, 2017. And who knows, maybe season 3, if Netflix is really smart and locks those deals down, although interestingly, that's a bit of a problem there as well, they could have a 2018 season 3, which would scratch the itch. Try saying that 3 times fast, right? So that, and maybe another movie or show would try and get in there with similar appeal in 2018. And it is, I think if they continue and hopefully push to raise the bar, it'll be okay. But it's an unnecessary risk for the franchise. I really wish it was set to go in 2018, first weekend of September. That would have been ideal. And I don't understand why Warner Brothers is messing with things that are so successful, both Wonder Woman 2 and It Chapter 2. And also, they have these kids that the rumor has they want to bring them back for a flashback, and kids are tricky because, especially the cast of It, they're right in the puberty zone, so they're going to change really fast. By the way, Jack Dylan Grazer, aka Eddie, just debuted last night on Me, Myself, and I on CBS. He was fabulous. I actually kind of like that show, and I think he did a really good job. I like that kid actor a lot. I think he's very appealing. And funny side note, he's Brian Grazer's nephew. Brian Grazer, of course, being Ron Howard's longtime producing partner. All right, so that's the first story of the day, and I'm very curious to hear what you think about it. Do you think Warner Brothers is messing up with these sequels? How do you feel about them so far? And do you think that 2 years is too long to wait for It Chapter 2? Or do you think you're like, I don't care as long as I'm getting it? We'll probably all go, but I mean, still, it's scary. All right, so anyway, the second story of the day is that at the end of the article announcing the It Chapter 2 release date, they just threw in, hilariously, this huge announcement that Teen Titans Go is getting a movie. I thought that was insane. I was like, how does this not get its own article? And that's set for July 27th, 2018. These are just release dates. That's why I'm discussing them on Morning Movie News. As both projects start to take more shape, they of course will be getting their own videos. But I'm absolutely thrilled, and I'm sure it might be like My Little Pony the movie. also in that they're too late. My Little Pony the movie, I think, missed its window, but it's still coming out. We'll see how it does when it hits theaters October 6th. And I think to some degree, Teen Titans has missed its window. But I'm excited that Warner Brothers is trying with this and what it could potentially mean for DC animation going forward. And we'll talk about that in just a moment. But I'd first like to say that I am 1,000% going to watch this, no matter how lame or late it might be, as I'm sure will every DC fan. I think they could potentially build on the Lego Batman movie's success, same kind of comedic vibe, and that did very well. That did $175 million domestic and $311 million worldwide off of an $80 million budget. But with Teen Titans Go, it's going to be the silly version of the characters. But I can't wait to see what Cyborg and Beast Boy do on the big screen. I think they're hilarious. Although I do have a hard time understanding how they're going to reconcile such a different version of Cyborg with the more serious one that Ray Fisher's trying to launch in the live-action DCEU films. And also, interestingly, they're going to have serious versions of the characters with Titans on the DC streaming service with Nightwing, Starfire, and Raven. Maybe they're just trying to really push the Titans brand, which I think is interesting. And maybe they think that if Teen Titans Go does well, it'll just help raise the profile of Titans as well. Titans is a very strong brand. I think they're muddling a little bit the launch with so many different versions of the characters at the same time. But I'm excited to see them at least recognize the potential with the Titans and put it into the mainstream space, because it's big right now with comic book fans, not so much mainstream. But also for DC Animation has long been one of the best aspects of what Warner Brothers has done with DC. And so if this does well, could we see more DC animation on the big screen? They've already been releasing some with Fathom Events, and they've done well, but I would love to see maybe more original animated stories instead of adaptations, and that would be very, very exciting. Although, you would think, oh, maybe Paul Dini and Bruce Timm will lead this, but I've been very disappointed with what Bruce Timm has been doing lately. But hopefully, we've as a DC fan, this is exciting, but also as an animation fan, this is exciting because I would love to see adult animation, animation aimed at an adult audience, move forward in the West. It's very popular in the East and Asia. But I would love to see it get a bigger audience here in the States, and using the DC characters could help achieve that. Very exciting. Now, speaking of dark things going to a different medium, Underworld is going to become a TV series. Len Wiseman, this is actually, he has a surprisingly robust television career, which we're going to discuss. And I guess he's decided to take that and partner it with the thing that launched his career and, allowed him to meet Kate Beckinsale, who he was married to for a while, and that's Underworld. Now, he wants to do an Underworld TV series, and so he's going to start shopping that around, and he says it's going to be more adult. And it turns out, as I said, he has a robust career on the small screen, having directed a number of pilots that have all mostly gone to series. He did the pilot for Hawaii Five-0, for Sleepy Hollow, which he's a co-creator on, also Lucifer. And the Sleepy Hollow connection is interesting to me. I could see Underworld as a television series being pitched as either like a Sleepy Hollow type show or a Game of Thrones type show even. It really depends on where it's going to live. If it's going to live on network television, whereas you can see Wiseman has a lot of connections with Sleepy Hollow, Lucifer, and Hawaii Five-0, or will it go to pay cable like HBO or Showtime, or a streaming service like Netflix or Amazon, or even maybe Hulu these days after The Handmaid's Tale did so well. If it goes to the latter, I could see Kate Beckinsale signing on because she's not really doing anything. She's not going to go to network, but I think she would definitely go to the other services, and I think that would be exciting. If Kate Beckinsale stayed, I would totally tune into that. Otherwise, I don't know. But I think, as a high caliber Game of Thrones type show, because I do like the mythology of Underworld with Kate Beckinsale attached, that seems like a winner to me. Otherwise, it seems more like Sleepy Hollow, which I don't watch those kind of shows. I'm not a fan of network television, really. I mean, I watch like Gotham and some sitcoms, but when it comes to hour-long dramas, for the most part, I don't like the network formula, which I think you can really see on Inhumans, by the way, on ABC. I think the reason Inhumans doesn't work is because they stuffed it into the network formula. And the network formula, again, is, I think, really grating to most people unless they're into network television, which is a big audience. That's what I wanted to end with. I mean, you could go network, and while I would never watch it, I mean, I'd probably review the first episode, but I mean, there's certainly an audience there, but I just would not be able to partake in it because, again, I can't stand the network formula. But I'm curious, under what circumstances would you watch an Underworld TV series? And if you were Len Wiseman, where would you ideally want to see it go? I mean, I could see it going in both directions. I think he just wants it to be successful. So he'll go with whoever's interested in it. All right, so those are the three stories of the day, and I have a great viewer question from Bay McCulloch. And Bay McCulloch, frequent BTT viewer and commenter, said, hi Bay, said, Grace, I have a question for you about this episode. You mentioned how, quote-unquote, A Star is Born from yesterday could act as counter-programming for Avengers Infinity War. What does that mean? Why would Avengers need counter-programming? How is that a strategy versus being swallowed up by the Avengers machine? Thanks for your insight and all your awesome content. Lots of emojis, smiles, Bay. Great question, because I think this is an old Hollywood formula, strategy, but I think that it is dying out, as Bay has noticed. So that's why I think it's such an interesting thing to discuss. So the old feeling was that women weren't interested in these big blockbusters for the most part. But they didn't want to be left out of going to the movies. So when a big blockbuster would come out that was male-centric, there would be like a more feminine movie that would come out, like a chick flick, and the women could go and see that, right? Now that's old thinking, because these days, as we discussed on Movie Math yesterday, most big blockbusters are split down the middle when it comes to the gender divide. They appeal to both men and women these days, especially when you have more and more female Avengers, which is very exciting. So they don't really need counter-programming. But, I think that they still are trying it because not everyone loves blockbusters, and there is some comic book movie fatigue. So, that audience is like, especially in May, they're like, summer's kicking off. I want to go to the multiplex. What is there for me? And that's where counter-programming can still come in. It can say, hey, if you're not into comic book movies or you need a break, come see A Star is Born. Also, since people are just in the habit of going to the movies, they're at the multiplex, they're seeing, the different posters for what's playing there up on the Times board, you might be able to peel off 1 or 2 extra screenings for Avengers Infinity War. You could be like, hey, you're coming back to the theater, but don't see Avengers Infinity War for the 3rd time. Come see A Star is Born. And so I think that's the idea there as well. But I think the counter-programming is going away, Bay. I think that's very insightful of you. And I think what you're really getting instead is competitive programming, where Netflix, for instance, will come in and drop a binge viewing experience, which is like 13 hours of programming, the same weekend as a really hot movie. And they're like, okay, you could go see this movie. I don't think they would take on also they have a relationship with Disney, although they kind of hate Disney too these days, because Disney is setting up their own streaming service and removing a lot of their content. But, who would go up against Avengers Infinity War? But for some of the smaller, more vulnerable movies, and we've talked about that recently, like that happened a lot in August. I said August, Hollywood didn't program August, but everybody else did. Netflix will say, well, don't go to the multiplex. You have to pay to see that movie, pay for all your snacks, pay for transportation. You can stay home. You already pay for Netflix as part of your monthly subscription, and I will give you 13 hours of quality programming that will take up your whole weekend. So that's what I think. I think counter-programming has been replaced by competitive programming. And we'll see how that develops. All right, so anyway, that's today's morning movie news. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please write down below what you think today's top 3 stories, Bay's viewer question, anything you'd like to see covered tomorrow, and any questions, of course, that you might have. Thanks for watching. Bye.